The My Lai Massacre ʻmiːʻlaɪ, or ʻmiːʻlaɪ, was the Vietnam War mass killing of between 347 and 504 unarmed civilians in South Vietnam on March 16, 1968. It was committed by U.S. Army soldiers from the Company C of the 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade of the 23rd Infantry Division. Victims included men, women, children, and infants. Some of the women were gang-raped and the bodies mutilated. 26 soldiers were charged with criminal offenses, but only Lieutenant William Calley Jr., a platoon leader in C Company, was convicted. Found guilty of killing 22 villagers. He was originally given a life sentence, but served only 3.5 years under house arrest. The massacre, which was later called the most shocking episode of the Vietnam War, took place in 2 hamlets of Sun My village in Quang Ngai Province. These hamlets were marked on the U.S. Army topographic maps as ʻmiːʻlaɪ and ʻmiːʻlaɪ. The U.S. military code word for the alleged Viet Cong stronghold in that area was Pinkville, and the carnage was initially referred to as the Pinkville Massacre. Later, when the U.S. Army started its investigation, the media changed it to the massacre at Song My. Currently, the event is referred to as the My Lai Massacre in the United States and called the Sun My Massacre in Vietnam. The incident prompted global outrage when it became public knowledge in November 1969. The My Lai Massacre increased to some extent domestic opposition to the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War when the scope of killing and cover-up attempts were exposed. Initially, 3 U.S. servicemen who had tried to halt the massacre and rescue the hiding civilians were shunned, and even denounced as traitors by several U.S. congressmen, including Mendel Rivers, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. Only after 30 years were they recognized and decorated, one posthumously, by the U.S. Army for shielding non-combatants from harm in a war zone. Incident: Charlie Company of the 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade, 23rd Infantry Division, arrived in South Vietnam in December 1967. Though the first 3 months in Vietnam passed without any direct enemy contact, by mid-March the company had suffered 28 casualties involving mines and booby traps. During the Tet Offensive of January 1968, attacks were carried out in Quang Ngai by the 48th Local Force Battalion of the National Liberation Front, commonly referred to by the U.S. Army as the Viet Cong. U.S. military intelligence assumed that the 48th NLF Battalion, having retreated and dispersed, was taking refuge in the village of Sun My, in Quang Ngai Province. A number of specific hamlets within that village, designated ʻmiːʻlaɪ through ʻmiːʻlaɪ, were suspected of harboring the 48th. In February and March 1968, the U.S. Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, was aggressively trying to regain the strategic initiative in South Vietnam after the Tet Offensive, and the search and destroy operation against the 48th NLF Battalion, thought to be located in Sun My, became a small part of America's grand strategy. Task Force Barker, a battalion-sized ad hoc unit of the 11th Brigade, was to be employed for the job. It was formed in January 1968, composed of 3 rifle companies of the 11th Brigade, including Company C from the 20th Infantry, led by Lieutenant Colonel Frank A. Barker. Sun My village was included in the area of operations of T.F. Barker, codenamed Muscatinow. Samuel W. Costa. In February 1968, T.F. Barker had already tried to secure Sun Mai, with limited success. After that, the village area began to be called Pinkville by T.F. Barker troops. On March 16–18, T.F. Barker planned to engage and destroy the remnants of the 48th NLF Battalion, allegedly hiding in the Sun Mai village area. Before engagement, Colonel Orrin K. Henderson, the 11th Brigade commander, urged his officers to go in there aggressively, close with the enemy and wipe them out for good. In turn, LTC Barker reportedly ordered the 1st Battalion commanders to burn the houses, kill the livestock, destroy food supplies, and destroy the wells. On the eve of the attack, at the Charlie Company briefing, Captain Ernest Medina told his men that nearly all the civilian residents of the hamlets in Sun Mai village would have left for the market by 7 o'clock, and that any who remained would be NLF or NLF sympathizers. He was asked whether the order included the killing of women and children. Those present later gave differing accounts of Medina's response. Some, including platoon leaders, testified that the orders as they understood them were to kill all guerrilla and North Vietnamese combatants and suspects, to burn the village, and pollute the wells. He was also quoted as saying, "They're all VC, now go and get them," and was heard to reply to the question, "Who is my enemy?" by saying, "Anybody that was running from us, hiding from us, or appeared to be the enemy. If a man was running, shoot him. Sometimes even if a woman with a rifle was running, shoot her." At Calley's trial, one defense witness testified that he remembered Medina instructing to destroy everything in the village that was walking, crawling or growing. Charlie Company was to enter the village of Sun Mai spearheaded by its 1st platoon, engage the enemy, and flush it out. The other two companies from T.F. Barker were ordered to secure the area and provide support if needed. The area was designated a free fire zone, where American forces were allowed to deploy artillery and air strikes in populated areas. Killings on the Saturday morning of March 16 at 7:30, around 100 soldiers from the Charlie Company led by CPT Ernest Medina, following a short artillery and helicopter gunship barrage, landed in helicopters at Sun Mai, a patchwork of settlements, rice paddies, irrigation ditches, dikes, and dirt roads, connecting an assortment of hamlets and sub-hamlets. The largest among them were the hamlets ʻmiːʻlaɪ, Kōluʻi, ʻmiːʻlaɪ, and Tu Kung. Though the GIs were not fired upon after landing, they still suspected there were Viet Cong guerrillas hiding underground or in the huts. Confirming the suspicions, the gunships engaged several armed enemy in the vicinity of ʻmiːʻlaɪ. Later, one weapon was retrieved from the site. According to the operational plan, the 1st platoon led by 2nd Lieutenant William Calley and the 2nd platoon led by 2LT Stephen Brooks entered the hamlet of Tu Kung in line formation at 8 o'clock, while the 3rd platoon commanded by 2LT Jeffrey U. The Cross and Captain Medina's command post remained outside. On approach, both platoons fired at people they saw in the rice fields and in the brush. The villagers, who were getting ready for a market day, at first did not panic or run away, and they were herded into the hamlet's commons. Harry Stanley, a machine gunner from the Charlie Company, said during the U.S.Army Criminal Investigation Division's inquiry that the killings started without warning. He first observed a member of the 1st platoon strike a Vietnamese man with a bayonet. Then, the same trooper pushed another villager into a well and threw a grenade in the well. Further, he saw 15 or 20 people, mainly women and children, kneeling around a temple with burning incense. They were praying and crying. They were all killed by shots in the head. Most of the killings occurred in the southern part of Tu Kung, a sub-hamlet of Xom Lang, which was a home to 700 residents. Xom Lang was erroneously marked on the U.S. military operational maps of Qamgai Province as ʻmiːʻlaɪ. A large group of approximately 70 to 80 villages was rounded up by the 1st Platoon in Xom Lang, and then led to an irrigation ditch to the east of the settlement. All detainees were pushed into the ditch and then killed after repeated orders issued by Lieutenant Cali, who was also shooting. Paul Meadlow, a private first class, testified that he expended several M16 magazines. He recollected that women were allegedly saying "no VC" and were trying to shield their children. He remembered that he was shooting into women with babies in the hands, since he was convinced at the time that they were all booby-trapped with grenades and were poised to attack. On another occasion during the security sweep of ʻmiːʻlaɪ, Meadlow again fired into civilians side by side with Lieutenant Cali. PFC Dennis Conti, a witness for the prosecution, told about one especially gruesome episode during the shooting. A lot of women had thrown themselves on top of the children to protect them, and the children were alive at first. Then, the children who were old enough to walk got up and Cali began to shoot the children. Other 1st Platoon members testified that many of the deaths of individual Vietnamese men, women and children occurred inside ʻmiːʻlaɪ during the security sweep. Livestock was shot as well. When PFC Michael Bernhardt entered the sub-hamlet of Xom Lang, the massacre was underway. I walked up and saw these guys doing strange things, setting fire to the futures and huts and waiting for people to come out and then shooting them. Going into the futures and shooting them, gathering people in groups and shooting them. As I walked in, you could see piles of people all through the village, all over. They were gathered up into large groups. I saw them shoot an M79 into a group of people who were still alive, but it was mostly done with a machine gun. They were shooting women and children just like anybody else. We met no resistance and I only saw 3 captured weapons. We had no casualties. It was just like any other Vietnamese village, old papa sans, women and kids. As a matter of fact, I don't remember seeing one military-age male in the entire place, dead or alive. One group of 20 to 50 villages was walked to the south of Xom Lang and killed on a dirt road. According to Ronald L. Haeble's eyewitness account of the massacre, in one instance, there were some South Vietnamese people, maybe 15 of them, women and children included, walking on a dirt road maybe 100 yards away. All of a sudden the GIs just opened up with M16s. Beside the M16 fire, they were shooting at the people with M79 grenade launch. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Lieutenant Cali testified that he heard the shooting and arrived on the scene. He observed his men firing into a ditch with Vietnamese people inside, and he then started shooting with an M16 from a distance of 5 feet. Then, a helicopter landed on the other side of the ditch and a pilot asked Cali if he could provide any medical assistance to the wounded civilians in ʻmiːʻlaɪ. Cali admitted, replying that a hand grenade was the only available means that he had for their evacuation. After that, around 11 o'clock, Captain Medina radioed to ceasefire and the 1st Platoon took a lunch break. Members of the 2nd Platoon killed at least 60 to 70 Vietnamese as they swept through the northern half of ʻmiːʻlaɪ and through Binh Tay, a small sub-hamlet about 400 meters north of ʻmiːʻlaɪ. The platoon suffered 1 dead and 7 wounded by mines and booby traps. After the initial sweeps by the 1st and 2nd platoons, the 3rd platoon was dispatched to deal with any remaining resistance. The 3rd platoon, which stayed in reserve, also reportedly rounded up and killed a group of 7 to 12 women and children. Since Charlie Company had not met any enemy opposition at My Lai and did not request backup, Bravo Company of the 4th Battalion, 3rd Infantry Regiment of T.F. Barker was transported by air between 8:15 and 8:33 kilometers away. It attacked the sub-hamlet ʻmiːʻlaɪ of the Kolui hamlet, which was mapped by the Army as ʻmiːʻlaɪ. During this operation, between 60 and 155 people, including women and children, were killed. Over the next day, both companies were involved in additional burning and destruction of dwellings, as well as mistreatment of Vietnamese detainees. While some soldiers of Charlie Company did not participate in the crimes, they neither openly protested nor complained later to the superiors. William Thomas Allison, a professor of military history at Georgia Southern University, wrote, "By mid-morning, members of Charlie Company had killed hundreds of civilians and raped or assaulted countless women and young girls. They encountered no enemy fire and found no weapons in My Lai itself." Helicopter Crew Intervention Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson, Jr., a helicopter pilot from Company B, 123rd Aviation Battalion, American Division, saw dead and wounded civilians as he was flying over the village of Sun Mai, providing close air support for ground forces. The crew made several attempts to radio for help for the wounded. They landed the helicopter by a ditch, which they noted was full of bodies and in which there was movement. Thompson asked a sergeant he encountered there if he could help get the people out of the ditch, and the sergeant replied that he would help them out of the misery. Thompson, shocked and confused, then spoke with 2LT Cali, who claimed to be just following orders. As the helicopter took off, Thompson saw missile firing into the ditch. Thompson and his crew witnessed an unarmed woman being kicked and shot at point-blank range by Captain Medina, who later claimed that he thought she had a hand grenade. Thompson then saw a group of civilians at a bunker being approached by ground personnel. Thompson landed and told his crew that if the soldiers shot at the Vietnamese while he was trying to get them out of the bunker, that they were to open fire on these soldiers. Thompson later testified that he spoke with a lieutenant and told him there were women and children in the bunker, and asked if the lieutenant would help get them out. According to Thompson, he said the only way to get them out was with a hand grenade. Thompson testified that he then told Brooks to just hold your men right where they are and I'll get the kids out. He found 12 to 16 people in the bunker, coaxed them out and led them to the helicopter, standing with them while they were flown out into groups. Returning to My Lai, Thompson and other aircrew members noticed several large groups of bodies. Spotting some survivors in the ditch, Thompson landed again. A crew member, Glenn Andreatta, entered the ditch and returned with a bloodied, but apparently unharmed child who was flown to safety. The child was thought to be a boy, but later turned out to be a 4-year-old girl. Thompson then reported what he had seen to his company commander, Major Frederick W. Watka, using terms such as murder and needless and unnecessary killings. Thompson's statements were confirmed by other helicopter pilots and aircrew members. For the actions at My Lai, Thompson was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, and his crew members Glenn Andreatta and Lawrence Colburn were awarded Bronze Star medals. Glenn Andreatta was awarded his medal posthumously, as he was killed in Vietnam on April 8, 1968. As the DFC citation included a fabricated account of rescuing a young girl from My Lai from intense crossfire. Thompson threw his medal away. He later received a Purple Heart for other services in Vietnam. In March 1998, the helicopter crew's medals were replaced by the Soldier's Medal, the highest the U. Army can award for bravery not involving direct conflict with the enemy. The medal citations state they were for heroism above and beyond the call of duty while saving the lives of at least 10 Vietnamese civilians during the unlawful massacre of non-combatants by American forces at My Lai. Thompson initially refused the medal when the U.S. Army wanted to award it quietly. He demanded it be done publicly and that his crew also be honored in the same way. The veterans also made contact with the survivors of My Lai.